So, Mike, were you just in the locker room a short time ago when players were talking?
I was. Yep.
What's the vibe there this week on this Wednesday following the comments from Jerod Mayo? We've read some of the comments from Keishawn Boutte. We've heard from him and others. What's the vibe in the room?
Good question, Beetle. I think the first thing that I was looking for was, are players resentful of the remarks, made by Jerod? And I did not sense that being in the room. One defensive player told me, we know that that's not us, meaning what they put on film. They don't think they're soft players, but what they put out there was not what they felt like is who they are as players. So I don't know if that makes sense, Beetle, but that was probably my big takeaway being in the room.
You were there live. You saw the 18 straight runs. Were you shocked that they didn't adjust to do something different, where they left that middle bubble there with Ellis about 5 yards off with his hands on his hips?
So as it's happening, I'm thinking to myself, maybe they should just run a safety through there, just call some type of
or him
run blitz,
yep,
something, and I think, and then watching it over again, which I try to do the next day, I probably felt it more strongly after the fact, as it was than when it was happening. And I think it's reflective of, say, young, I guess you'd say inexperienced coaching staff. And I felt like that was one that got away from him. And that's, to me, is on coaching.
So, Mike, at this point in the year, there seems to be a pretty big microscope on the coaching, given that they're now 1-6. They obviously have a bunch of different problems. Defensively, they've got problems all over the place. When it comes to Jerod Mayo as head coach of this team, does he look like a guy right now who's in over his head? Who looks like a guy who's struggling to kind of gain control of the situation?
I think it's fair the way you put it, Beetle. I mean, the thought I would have is when you're 1-6 and you could almost make the case each week it's gotten a little worse. There's not a lot of positive things to say, and ultimately coaches are paid to come up with answers. And I do think the talent's part of it, but I think what you said was fair.
Mike, you and I did pregame for Channel 4 game day, hour and a half before the game, like we always do. Then we walked the field. You were heading upstairs with me, and we ran into RKK. And I had a brief conversation with him. You talked to him after that. What did you talk to him about? What did you cover over the weekend? Being at that fan party and sort of how he feels about the team right now and what's going on.
I'm glad you asked it, Zoe. I actually wrote it down, trying to be prepared for this stuff. And because I think I was, hearing the conversation a little bit on, would they even consider moving on, after 7 games from Jerod Mayo. And this was obviously before the game, but this was on the record, from Robert Kraft. He said, quote, "Everything doesn't happen as fast as I would like. We've had a lot of changes, and I still believe in the chemistry of what's taken place." So I thought, to me, as a reporter, obviously people can say whatever they want, but that was a comment that was on the record from the owner. And well, I do think that there's concern at that level with what's taking place with the team right now, and by extension with the coaches, right? I think ultimately, I believe that is the general close to where he feels like look, we knew there were going to be some growing pains. These are probably a little bit more significant than we anticipated. And, but I don't sense, what I'm trying to say, though, is I don't sense a bailout here.
All right.
What I'm trying to say.
But if I could just focus in on that to point that out, Mike, you're saying that there is concern at the ownership level about what's happening with the team and the coaching.
Beetle, yes. And if there wasn't, I think that would be a greater concern. I mean, the bottom line is you're 1-6. You're one of the worst teams in the league. And there's different 1-6s. I would argue this is not a good 1-6. You're not seeing things getting better on a week-to-week basis.
Is Jerod's job safe for next year?
So I think I think as we talk right now, I believe that it is. But there's still, what are we? We got 17 game season, 10 games left.
Yep.
I mean, you got to see what happens. I mean, Beetle, and I hate getting into hypotheticals, but if the players stop playing, well, like you can't sit here and say it's, like you got to see how it unfolds. It's like asking who's going to win the marathon at the 8-mile mark. It's a little hard to answer that. We got to see what it looks like the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, my thought would be that they don't want to do that under any circumstance, that they do not want to be put in a position where they have to fire Jerod Mayo, a guy that they handpicked and have a close personal relationship with and only want to see success for both him and their team. I mean, I just wonder if it's even a possibility. Even if things go poorly and it gets worse and they end up as a 1-win team by the end, my sense is that they would do everything in their power to not move on from him, that they would find other ways around it. They would fire everybody else but him, right? To me, he is the guy they want to protect more than anybody else in the building.
I feel the same way you do, Beetle. And so whether that means, bringing in more support around him, I do expect aggressiveness personnel-wise, in terms of improving the roster, because I think that's part of the whole conversation. So yeah, I'm with you, Beetle. I think it would have to be a last, I don't want to say last resort, but it would be low on the list of things they'd want to do.
Let me ask you this. I want to ask it the right way. So I made this point earlier in the show that, Jerod's really watched 7 games from top to bottom, as a coach, because when you're a defensive coach, you're dealing with your unit and you're not watching your own offense. So now as he's absorbing all this, does he have the offensive background to where you get on it, you say, okay, I'm listening to all the conversations with all our coaches on the headset. Can he interject offensively? Like, is this his offensive staff? Was it picked for him to where maybe if it doesn't go well, they're going to have an easy job whacking the whole offense, because this isn't going to be Jerod's fault because he didn't pick these guys. You know what I'm saying?
I don't think so. I
think that's the tough part. You know what I mean? Because they interviewed a lot of offensive coordinators.
I know, Zoe, but I think that would be letting Jerod off the hook. I mean, ultimately, you're the head coach. This is your staff, and maybe you had support picking the staff because maybe you didn't have the wide background of knowing a lot of coaches, around the league to do it.
Well, that's part of it, yeah. Like,
and
that would lead me to believe we need to get him more. You know what I mean? Because he's learning on the fly too. I don't think that his job. I think he's back next year, regardless of how this thing finishes, unless there's like cataclysmic collapse at the end of the year. Team checks out in December, and they're saying what they want to in the press, and it's just off the rails totally.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And
like they gotta get help.
I do, and I think that would be consistent with what has been said on the record right now from Robert Kraft. So I feel the same way. So just talking about like offensive background for Mayo, I mean, I'm going back to one of the, whether it was the spring or the summer, he was talking about, quarterback mechanics and how that's not in his wheelhouse unless it's someone like Phillip Rivers, who has such a quirky mechanics, that he would say, that doesn't, look right or whatever. Right. So I do think there's a lot of like, hey, this is my offensive staff. Like, you guys do what you do. Like, I don't know if you disagree with me or.
No, but like, remember Flores down in Miami was there. Like, he and Chad O'Shea were tight here. And then he takes him down there with him. He didn't like what he was seeing offensively, and he fired him.
Yep.
Like, he made that move quick. I'm just like, okay, Mike Tomlin is a defensive-minded head coach. I'm sure he doesn't get quarterback mechanics well. Right. If you're a defensive-minded guy, you don't, nor did Flo. Right. But, like, it's where do you need the most help? Obviously, the personnel is not what they want it to be or what they envision. Yep. So, like, not only do you need help personnel-wise, like, I'm wondering, do you need help coaching? Like, are you overmatched coaching? Because they're dealing with twice as many coaches they had a year ago. We're traveling 20 guys,
Yeah.
10 last year.
Yeah. And maybe, so in retrospect, when we get to the end of the season, they might come to the conclusion that for a first-year head coach, we we needed to surround him with more experience, people who had been in that role before. I think part of it going in was that they didn't want anyone that maybe was looking to further their own agenda to become a head coach, and maybe they overcompensated, by the way they put the staff together.
Hey, if you like that clip, check out more videos from Zolak and Bertrand right here. For more Patriots analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.